Welcome, everyone, to the Villanova Basketball Preseason Tip-Off Show. I'm Steve Pinone. I'm joined by Whitey Rigsby as we look forward to the 22-23 season for the Villanova Wildcats. Whitey, before we talk this year, let's look a little bit about last year's team. Wildcats go 30-8 overall, 16-4 in the Big East regular season, a Big East championship, and a Final Four berth.
And it's just another great Jay Wright season, another great season for Villanova basketball in this era of excellence. There's really nothing more you can call it. To get back to the Final Four again last year was just incredible. It was a joy. We enjoyed it. The Nova Nation enjoyed it. And it was just a tremendous season. I've always said, Steve, if you get to the second week of the NCAA tournament, that's a successful year. If you get to the Final Four, it's extreme.
And breaking down the season, the Wildcats challenged themselves early, really strong out-of-conference schedule, came out 7-4 to start the season. A lot of questions about the team. Would they be able to respond? And then they just reel off a bunch of wins in January and February and had an outstanding Big East season. Quote-unquote, Providence won the regular season by percentage. The Wildcats had the most wins at 16. Let's talk a little bit. We'll break it down preseason first. The Wildcats open the season at a big game at UCLA. They lose that one in overtime, and then they head up to Connecticut, some challenging games as well.
But, you know, Steve, you and I were at courtside for that UCLA game, and I think we left that game while Villanova lost the game. I think we felt pretty good about the team. This is a team that just went 3,000 miles against a very good basketball team at UCLA and was in the game to the very end. We saw some great play from different players, and we found out early and often that Colin Gillespie was going to be a big-time leader in this program.
And then they went back up to Uncasville, Connecticut for the big tournament up there. Had a really solid win over a really good Tennessee team, as it turns out, and then played Purdue, had a lead in the second half, kind of faltered down the stretch. Purdue ends up pulling away.
Yeah, and people talk about, can this team finish games? Because that's what happened at UCLA. They kind of faltered down the stretch, and they did against Purdue. Talk about two very good teams. Purdue was a very good team. UCLA was a very good team. And I think this team was learning then. They were learning to play with each other a little bit more, learning to see who the leaders were, learning to see who the go-to guys were going to be. And as the season went on, we saw a lot of that. We knew who it was.
And I guess probably the toughest point of the season, to go down to Waco, Texas, take on the defending national champions Baylor, and just don't play well. Really struggled offensively, get handled pretty easily by the Baylor Bears. And then they have to go back on the road to a really good Creighton team and lose that game by 20. And everyone's asking, oh, this team's 7-4. They were a preseason top 5 team. Are they as good as we all thought? What are your thoughts when you're coming home from Creighton after that tough loss?
Well, you wonder what Coach Wright's going to say to them. What is he going to say to these guys to get them all back together, all back on the same page, all with a quote-unquote great attitude? But he did. Whatever he said was right, because this team turned it around after that. And it was almost like those two bumps in the road had to happen. Again, they lost 8 times. They lost twice in a week. And let's face it, the Nova Nation was pretty despondent about that. But whatever he said to them worked. And I think this team also on the court, Steve, had very good leadership in Gillespie, in Jermaine Samuels. And I think that made a big difference.
And that first game in the league was at Creighton, a loss. So they're 0-1 to start the league. They go 16-3 the rest of the way in the regular season. Some really quality wins. The one at UConn down at the Wells Fargo Center jumps out to me. You know, a lot of other really quality wins. They beat Creighton back here at home. Some of the wins that stood out during the Big East season for you?
Yeah, and I was going to say the loss that stood out in the Big East season was the game at Connecticut when some people say they might have gotten hosed. It was kind of a questionable call or two at the end of that game. But that was a great game in a great atmosphere. And one thing about this league now, Steve, and we go around from place to place to place, they're just great atmospheres that Villanova plays in. And I think when Villanova shows up, it creates a great atmosphere for our opponents in the league.
Yeah, they're always getting a sold-out crowd. Again, the other team's best effort, as Villanova's kind of the marquee program in this league for so long that it's everyone's big game on the schedule.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see it time and time again. You see the crowds on the road and just the excitement when Villanova arrives. And Villanova has been the standard bearer for this league since the league expanded, or in 2013, we should say. And it'll be interesting to see moving forward how much that continues.
Yeah, and obviously what everyone looks forward to in college basketball, the month of March. And all the Villanova fans in the Nova Nation look forward to going to Madison Square Garden for that second week in March. The Wildcats come from 16 down and beat a really improving St. John's team. Then they have the rubber match against Connecticut. They find a way to win that. And then the nail-biter and grind-out game against Creighton. It looked like both teams were just exhausted down the stretch, really struggled shooting the ball, but the Wildcats come away with the Big East Tournament championship.
Villanova has played so well in New York City. You think that's their home court, in Madison Square Garden in particular. They've played so well there time and time again. It was a different player each time, and I think the one guy who really stood out, as I remember months and months later now, was Brandon Slater. Not only the free throws he made in the one game, but the 2 incredible defensive plays he made, where he blocked shots up against the backboard, were key plays in those games. He stood out big time for that Villanova team in that stretch run in the Big East tournament.
And the Wildcats advance, so they get a 3 seed in the NCAA tournament. They play a local team. They play the Delaware Blue Hens to open it, defeat the Blue Hens pretty handily. bit of a tight game for about 10 minutes. Wildcats pull away in the last 30. And then it's on to the Big Ten. They have a really tough game with Ohio State out in Pittsburgh to advance to the Sweet 16.
Yeah, and we had seen Ohio State recently because we were out in Columbus, I think, a year or so before that. And they're a very good basketball team. And again, when you play these Power 5 conference teams, they're not scared of you in any way, shape, or form because you're Villanova. And they came out ready to play, and Villanova did a great job to advance to that second weekend that we talk about.
And everyone and the Nova Nation loves the city of San Antonio for all the memories it brings. So we look at that and you say, hey, they go down there, they got to play the Michigan Wolverines, who upset Tennessee, who we played earlier in the year. That was such a big deal. And then they win that game, and then it's an opportunity to take the Houston Cougars for a trip to the Final Four.
Yeah, I did not want to play Tennessee again. And playing Michigan, our old friend Phil Martelli, of course, is the assistant coach at Michigan. That was a terrific basketball game as well. And then you go on and play a Houston team that was very good last year, will be very good this year. We'll talk about that later, perhaps. To get that win and to go back to the Final Four once again was just a tremendous thing for the Nova Nation, tremendous thing for this basketball program. Obviously, the disappointing part was with a few seconds left, literally right in front of us, Justin Moore hurt his Achilles.
Yeah, the Wildcats advanced to their third Final Four in 6 seasons. And the unfortunate part, as Whitey mentioned, Justin Moore goes down with a torn Achilles with just a handful of seconds left in that game. He's unable to play in the Final Four. We'll hopefully find out when he'll be able to come back this season at some point.
But even that moment when that happened, and then they won the regional, to see the way his teammates gathered around him, we all wanted to be a part of him, wanted to make sure he knew he was a big part of this victory. It was a great bonding thing, I think, for this team. Unfortunate way to get it, but I think it was terrific. It showed the bond this team has with each other.
And then, a great year ends at 30-8 with another Final Four bid. But probably maybe even bigger than the season was the off-season news that there's going to be a coaching change. Jay Wright, after 21 seasons as head coach, decides to retire. Kyle Neptune is hired, a former assistant who's been here for over 12 years. I guess, Whitey, talk a little bit about, the shock that everyone felt that Coach Wright at age 60 decided, hey, I've had enough, I'm going to go on and do other things.
Well, he was in our office the morning the news came out, didn't mention a word to us about it, right? So we were really shocked, along with the whole, again, I say the Nova Nation, the whole basketball world, I think. But I think that the college basketball game is changing to some degree. Coach Wright did such a great job establishing this program the way it's been these last 20-some-odd years, and he's handing the ball over to Kyle Neptune, who's one of his guys, guy who recruited every player on this team with the exception of the freshman, who we had to go to re-recruit, had a very successful year as a head coach at Fordham last year, and I think he's ready for the task.
And you talk about that transition and the changes in college basketball. The biggest change is the transfer portal. The Wildcats only lose one player. Brian Antoine decides to move on. He's at Radford University now. Kyle Neptune comes in as the head coach. He's able to sign the 3 signed recruits. He's able to get them to recommit to Villanova, and they enroll in August, and the roster is intact.
Yeah, that was really big, keeping those 3 guys. And that's not easy because, again, like we said, all the rest of the players in this program know Kyle Neptune very well. He recruited them all, or was a part of their recruiting. These 3 guys he was not. So he had to go back out and visit with all 3 of them to make sure all 3 were going to continue to come. And I think Coach Wright certainly helped a lot with that. Associate head coach George Halkovich, Mike Nardi, Dwayne Anderson, they all helped, made sure that happened, made sure there was continuity in the program with Kyle Neptune.
We're going to take a quick break because we have an opportunity here to catch up with some of those Wildcats right after this.
Chance to catch up with graduate senior Caleb Dennis. Caleb, thanks for spending some time with us.
Thank you.
Caleb, let's first talk a little bit about last season. I mean, just a great year for Villanova basketball, Final Four run. Your impressions on making it back to your home in New Orleans?
I thought it was a phenomenal year for us. Early on, we kind of struggled a little bit, but we stayed together, and we kept getting better day by day. And as you saw, we grew into the team that we were, making it to the Final Four.
That team had some good players on it, very good players, including yourself, of course. But you lost Jermaine Samuels. You lost Colin Gillespie. How much of an impact will that have on this team this year, and how much has it impacted already just in practice?
There are 2 great leaders that we had. It was a big loss that we have, but they taught us the way. Taught me, Slate, Eric, Justin the way, and also Chris Archidiakono as well the way. So them just leading every day and us seeing that was powerful for us. So us stepping into those roles this year is very crucial, and I think we're doing a great job of that.
I was about to say, someone can score 15 points, but someone has to step in the role as be the leader, as be the Jermaine Samuels, be the Colin Gillespie. Is that you and Brandon?
Yes, sir. We got to make those tough plays every night, so we have to do and step up into that role.
Now, how about actually on the court? I mean, on the court for games. Between those 2 and Justin, who probably won't be around until the first of the year, we're thinking, you're losing 100 minutes of playing time. Who fills those roles?
I just think everyone has to just step up and step into their roles that they need to play. And if we just stay together, we know Justin brings so much stuff to our team, so many contributions to our team. But if we all can just stay together and just play hard for one another, I think that we can all make that step forward as a team.
As most people might be aware, there was another slight change this year, too, of a gentleman who's not going to be back. Coach Jay Wright obviously went in, retired, surprised us all, surprised you, I guess. How's that been? How's it been without him? How's it been with Coach Nepp as the new head coach?
Having Coach Nepp as a new coach is a blessing because he's one of our own. He's always been one of our own. He was under Coach Wright when he was an assistant. So not much really changes. It's basically keeping it in the family, keeping things the same way, and now it's just about keeping our tradition, moving it forward, and keeping it the way it is.
Coach Wright set up a very difficult schedule for you, especially early this season. Again, as it's well documented, you've had some injuries. Obviously Justin's not ready yet. Cam's not ready yet. How do you see this season starting out? And you think this team, as Coach Wright always wanted you to be playing your best basketball in March, is that going to happen again this year, you think?
I think it can happen. Yes, sir. Early on, like you said, it'll be tough, but it's a great test for us because that's how it's going to be at the end of the year. So I think if we just stay together, we always just continue to get better. That's the most important thing, getting better in the most difficult situations. I think that we have a great chance of becoming a great team by the end of the year and essentially being the best team that we can be.
We're going to catch up with Brandon Slater in a minute. I'm going to ask him why he changed uniform numbers. I think it's very important for you to tell everybody why you wear number 14.
Hey, it's homage to you, right?
Right on, Kim. Thanks for spending some time with us.
Yes, sir.
We'll be back with more of the show right after this.
Welcome back to the Villanova Basketball Preseason Tip-Off Show. Whitey, we're going to discuss this year's team. That's why we're all here as the season gets ready to start this week against the LaSalle Explorers. Wildcats are picked third in the Big East, which is a little bit unusual. Creighton Blue Jays, a top 10, 5 team, depending on what poll you look at, would pick first. Xavier, a little bit surprising, pick second, and the Wildcats third.
Yeah, Creighton is everybody's top 5 or 10 team in the entire country. I was talking with one of the head of the officials the other day, and he raved about them. And then I noticed that 5 of their players were picked in the top 100 players in the country. So Creighton will be very good, especially out in Omaha.
And then what do we think about the Wildcats being picked third in terms of are you disappointed? Do you think that's good? We can play the underdog role a little bit. How do you like it as a fan?
Well, I think as a fan, I want to be first. As a fan, I want to be first, picked first. Anybody that says that they don't want to be picked first is not being truthful, I think. So I think you'd want to be picked first, whether you're a fan or a coach or whomever. I think the fact this team is picked as third is pretty good. Creighton is a top 5 or 10 team in the country, so the fact we're picked behind them is no big surprise. Behind Xavier is a little bit of a surprise, but they have a lot of returning players. Villanova's best 1 or 2 players is a very unknown guy. I mean, Cam Whitmore, we haven't talked about him at all yet, is one of the top players in the country, they say, out of high school. So we don't know as much about him, and nationally, people don't know as much about him.
Yeah. And the Wildcats bring back a strong nucleus, probably led by Brandon Slater, Caleb Daniels, and Eric Dixon of the healthy guys that are coming back. Those 3 guys will probably be the leaders of this team. Daniels and Slater, 5- and 6-year guys, have been around the program a long time. Obviously, Eric Dixon is a 4th-year player as well. Let's start up front, and then, let's start with Eric Dixon.
Well, I think Eric Dixon has shown great improvement. I saw him play as a freshman in high school, and he was kind of a round, skilled kid, but soft. And the way he's transformed his body and his game, I think he's a big-time player now. Picked preseason second-team All-League, I believe. Had his best game against the preseason Player of the Year in Adam Sanogo this year. He was terrific. He had 24 and 12 against him last year at the Wells Fargo Center. And I think Eric Dixon's ready to make that next step where he will be a consistent, regular three-point shooter. Shot about 45% last year from 3. Just didn't take a lot of shots. I think adding that to his arsenal will make him a much better player because as a 5-man, he'll bring the Sonogos away from the basket, open things up for our guards backing down.
And then probably someone that went under the radar, so to speak, if you can hear it, Villanova, was Jermaine Samuels, who's moved on and graduated, had an opportunity with the Indiana Pacers in the offseason. But so probably Brandon Slater is going to fill into that hybrid forward role a little bit. His maturation has been well chronicled here, kind of learned as his first couple of years and played off the bench, and last year became a starter. Now in his 5th season, a lot's expected from Brandon.
Yeah, Brandon, very athletic. Very good-looking shot. Remember, early in the season, he really shot the ball from 3 very well. Kind of lulled a little bit after that point in time. Very good defensively, long, athletic. We talked about the plays he made earlier in the Big East tournament with athletic plays, blocking the ball against the backboard. I think Brandon Slater is going to have a big-time year because he doesn't have to be the guy on this team. I don't know if he's, they're going to have Daniels, they're going to have Cam Whitmore. I think Brandon Slater will step into his role perfectly. And you're right, it's kind of morphing Jermaine Samuels a little bit. And I think he's a little bit more skilled than Jermaine was.
And then obviously I think the focal point of the offense early in the year will probably run through Caleb Daniels, who played extremely well from about New Year's Day on last year, had the COVID issues, kind of overcame them. And then the last 6 to 8 weeks of the season was an outstanding player for the Wildcats.
Yeah, people realize he scored a lot of points before he came to Villanova for Tulane. I mean, he was a big-time scorer down there, comes in here. He's always reminded me of Randy Foy. You know, kind of an athletic, square, physical two-guard who could play up front more because he's big and strong, really shoots the ball well, has great range in his shot. And I think that he will become much more of the focal point. He's a guy I think on this team could be the leading scorer, at the end of the season. You can look back, I think Caleb Daniels is going to be getting 14, 15 points a game.
And the big question mark, I think, for this team is obviously in the backcourt. All-American Colin Gillespie has moved on. Justin Moore's injury, he's not going to be ready till we're not exactly sure. We certainly won't be ready at the start of the season. So the backcourt's going to be a lot of untested guys. Probably we can throw a few names at you. Obviously, Jordan Longino, who got some minutes last year, can play on the wing. He had some injury issues late in the year. Angelo Brizzi redshirted as a freshman. Chris Archidiacono coming back for another year. And then we'll get to the freshmen at a later point.
Yeah, I think that Longino's injury at the end of last year, along with obviously Justin Moore's, really hurt Villanova in that national semifinal game because either Longino or Moore could have guarded Obiagi, and who really went off in that game. So I think Longino is a guy on this team. He's kind of an X factor. He's been hurt on and off throughout his career, but he also is very athletic, tough kid. Played football at GA, scored a lot of points at GA in basketball. I think he could really be an X factor and a guy who makes a difference whether he starts or comes off the bench. But you're right, the guard play here has always been excellent. And I don't think this year this team will take a step back at all in that regard as we get into January and February.
And let's talk a little bit about the primary ball handlers returning, and then we'll talk, as I mentioned, the freshmen we'll talk about a little bit later. And that's Angelo Brizzi and Chris Archidiacono will probably be your primary ball handlers along with Mark Armstrong at some point.
Yeah, Stephen, if you think about Villanova and the point guards Villanova's had since 2012 or 13, Ryan Archidiacono, Jalen Brunson, Colin Gillespie. You're talking about really, really big shoes to fill for whoever that is. I mean, obviously Chris Arch has the right name, but I mean, he's not his brother. Then you have Brizzi coming in who hasn't played a game yet. We saw him last year in practice a lot, so one of those two guys is going to have to step up and fill very, very big shoes.
And two guys that are going to get an opportunity up front and provide some depth and some very important minutes is Njoku and Trey Patterson up front. And what do you think about those guys? What have you seen from them in the preseason?
Well, see, I always thought last preseason, I thought Njoku had a great shot to be the starting center as opposed to Eric Dixon. I think Eric Dixon just kind of overwhelmed Coach Wright early in the season, and he put him in there, and he just stayed. He couldn't take him out. And again, Njoku Nana also had some physical ailments. He had some health issues with dehydration, so he was out a lot. Never really got. I think it's so hard when a freshman is out and misses practice with his teammates. I think that's a big thing. I think that hurt him. He will be better and better. He looks bigger, strong. His body looks better than it was a year ago.
And then we talk about a very heralded freshman class. 3 recruits coming in. Kyle Neptune and his staff are able to get them all to recommit to Villanova. And then led by Cam Whitmore, who's a very versatile forward. We'll start with him, a McDonald's All-American, gold medal winner this summer. What have you seen from Cam Whitmore?
He's a man. He's a kid. I think he just turned 18 in August, but he looks like he should be playing middle linebacker for the Green Bay Packers. 6'7" and a half, ripped, big, strong, can shoot the ball from way out. He can LeBron James people, just go into the basket, just being physical, just pushing you out of the way, going to the basket. So the Nova Nation, the fan base should be very excited to see this young man play, as we all are, and I think he's going to take this league by surprise.
Yeah, and an unfortunate preseason injury.
Yeah.
You don't know exactly when Cam will be back, but that will be an exciting time to see him out in the court with a Villanova jersey on.
Same thing. I hate to see a freshman miss this much time early. He's a very talented. They say he's the most talented freshman since Tim Thomas. We'll see, but again, he's missed 5 or 6 weeks of practice with his teammates to get used to them.
And then the Wildcats bring in two backcourt mates, and it's going to be Mark Armstrong. I guess you'll call him a point guard, and then Brendan Housen, kind of a wing shooter, a combo guard, can do a little bit of both. Start with Brendan Housen.
Well, Brendan Housen, and I love watching warm-ups. When I broadcast game, I love watching warm-ups probably more than watching the game, because you can really tell what's going to go on from watching warm-ups. And I watched him warm up before the Hoops Mania game, and he was at one end completely all by himself. And Steve, he had to shoot 33s. Now it was just he and a manager, just shooting, no one guarding him. Of those 33s, he missed 2. He hit the rim on 3 others. The other 25 went right in. The net barely moved. So he can really, really shoot. Now, mind you, that was in an empty gym with no one around. I get it. I know it's different. But he's an excellent, excellent shooter. Kid from Texas, coach's son, knows how to play the game, and is an excellent shooter.
And Mark Armstrong, who was a teammate of Cam Whitmore this summer, won a gold medal with USA basketball. Looks like a really athletic, skilled player.
Yeah, he reminds me kind of a crazy way of Kenny Wilson because he's quick, he plays well on the ball, he's a very good shooter, more athletic than Kenny was, but that kind of play, I just think the sky's the limit for Armstrong. I think he's a fresh. People have to remember, this is a freshman point guard. It's been a long time since a freshman point guard, Ryan Arcidiacono, had the ball in his hands to start the season. And that could be the case. He can have the ball in his hands a lot, along with Chris Arch and along with Brizzy.
And you mentioned Kenny Wilson. I don't go back quite that far. He also reminds me a little bit of John Celestin. He has that extra gear that John had, the ability to finish, also the athleticism to get up on his jump shot, and I think he's a very good shooter as well.
Very good shooter.
I think you're going to see a lot of Mark Armstrong this year as well.
I think you're going to. It'll be interesting to see. Like no point guard's playing 35 minutes. They're going to split that a lot, especially until Justin Moore comes back. When Justin Moore comes back, things could change again.
Okay, we've mentioned a lot of new players in new roles and new players coming in and trying to evolve into roles. The most important new person is we have a new head coach in Kyle Neptune. You've had an opportunity to stop by some practices. We've been around Kyle for a long time. Describe to the fan base, who is Kyle Neptune? What kind of style of basketball will we see from Coach Neptune?
Well, again, Kyle Neptune would tell you he learned everything he knows about being a head coach from Jay Wright. In other words, he's been here most of his life. I mean, he's 38 years old now. He was here for 12 years. So the coaching he knows, he learned from Coach Wright. And I'll tell you a quick sidebar. The day after before the announcement was made, when everyone knew about it, was the day of our banquet. And he takes me back into the gym the day after the banquet. And there was 700 people at the banquet last year. And he turns to me and says, "Whitey, do you realize everyone in this building last night was sad except me?" Because he was now becoming the new head coach of Villanova University. He's so excited in the job. I think he's going to do terrific. Again, we've been to practice. We've seen how hard this team works. They're going to still use the attitude. They're going to still, these kids, it was a very smooth transition. Coach Wright sure has been around some, but you go to practice, Kyle Neptune is running that team along with George Halkovich and Mike Nardi and Dwayne Anderson.
And Whitey Rigsby had an opportunity to catch up with one of our Wildcat leaders.
A chance to catch up with one of our captains for this season, one of my top guys, my favorite people, Brandon Slater. Brandon, thanks for spending some time with us, pal.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Looking forward to the season?
Yes, I am.
What about last season? Pretty good run at the end of the year, 30-8, Final Four. Every college basketball player, every young basketball player's dream.
Yeah, I mean that season last year was magical and it was historic, man. We set the record for free throws in the season, the free throw percentage, highest free throw percentage in college basketball history.
You at 88%, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Just practicing, and my teammates and my coaches, we always in the gym just trying to do the best we can. And last year, I think we just after early tough losses, I think we just kind of just built a camaraderie between each other that helped us propel ourselves to the end of the season.
Speaking of free throws, how much time do you guys spend shooting free throws? Because that was historic. That literally was historic. The greatest free throw shooting team of all time.
Yeah, I mean, if I could tell you in words, I think it would be literally 24/7. Every single day we're in the gym shooting free throws. And it's a big thing in our program. We just try to tell ourselves that we're going to focus and we're going to try to be our best at everything that we do. And free throws is a task at hand, and we're going to do that.
You had a chance to catch up with Caleb earlier today and talking about last year's team, sure, but also moving into forward, you lose two really serious leaders in Colin Gillespie and Jermaine Samuels. How do you replace guys like that?
Yeah, so the first thing, you can't replace a guy like Colin Gillespie. You can't replace a guy like Jermaine Samuels. Two guys who've been very influential into this program, and without them last year, we wouldn't have been anything close to what we were. They were very important, the most important players on our team. There's our leaders, there's our captains. Then they were also doing every little thing on the floor for us. So losing that, it was a big void, and it's something that we're working through. But I think we have really good players, and we have guys like Caleb Daniels, myself, Justin Moore, who's currently out right now. We have Eric Dixon. We have new guys, Cam Whitmore. We have that freshman class. We have Mark Armstrong. We have Brendan Housen, and then we have the sophomores who are very talented, very talented. So I think that we have some guys who now step into the roles, and then I think we'll be pretty good.
And that's the thing we were speaking about. I mean, scoring the points are one thing, getting rebounds are one thing, but stepping into those roles, like your role is different this year than it was a year ago. You now have to be a leader on the court and off the court. Ready for the challenge?
Yes, I am ready.
That doesn't surprise me at all. But then you change your number on me.
Yeah.
Why? Why'd we go to 34?
Yeah, I mean, 34 here at Villanova is a very historic number. There's a lot of great players who wore 34. But when I was growing up playing basketball, I wore 34, and it was my favorite number. And when I got here freshman year, Tim Delaney was wearing 34. Shout out Tim, man. He did not let me get 34, so I kind of held on to 3 for a little hot second, and then when I had the opportunity this year to change my number, I jumped at it.
Last question. There was also another little bit of a change in this program that came out in April after Colin, and we talked about Colin and Jermaine. The coach decided to retire.
Oh, yeah, I didn't. I forgot
Remember that?
that?
Remember that guy? How's it been without Coach Wright? Obviously, Coach Knepp is part of the family.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a change when somebody so amazing and somebody so meaningful to this program leaves, and a guy, a Hall of Fame coach, one of the best coaches of all time, Coach Wright, when he leaves and he decides to retire. We were all happy for him. We were excited for him to his start on his new journey, and we understood why he made that decision. And then having a guy like Coach Knepp, he was honestly the coach for me for the first 3 years. He was an assistant coach for me, so I kind of understood that coaching change, and then him stepping up into that role. It was kind of just like, oh, he's back. It's not really a difference in sort of the teaching that we have. It's just more so coming from a different person now.
That's great. Brandon, thanks for spending time with Brandon Slater, by the way, is one of my favorite guys. He's number 2 only to his father, Greg, who's my favorite guy. Thanks a lot, Brandon.
Thank you so much.
We'll be back with more of the show right after this.
Welcome back to the Villanova basketball preseason tip-off show. And Whitey, it's here. The season's upon us. The Wildcats take on the LaSalle Explorers on Monday night. An old coach, but a new name at LaSalle. I guess he was there as a player back in the early 70s, but Fran Dunphy takes over on Olney.
Yeah, Fran Dunphy is kind of a Big Five mutt. And I say that in that he coached at Temple, he coached at Penn, now he's coaching LaSalle, and he got his master's from Villanova, right? So, I mean, he's kind of been around quite a bit, and just a wonderful friend of ours, a friend of the Philadelphia basketball arena, a good guy I was very surprised. I tell you, were you surprised that he took that job as Jay Wright leaving here?
You know, it's interesting when they decided to make a coaching change and the names that were bandied about and his name was being mentioned, in my mind, he went to the top of the pile because he's a Philly guy. He's won at Temple. He's won at Penn. It's his alma mater. Yeah. I think he feels strongly about trying to revitalize that program. And we all know, we've seen him for over the years, he's an outstanding coach. So one thing they're going to do, they're going to play hard. They're going to share the basketball. They're going to take good shots, and they're going to guard you. So the Wildcats are going to have their hands full. It's that first game nerves is always a part of it. They're in a new regime, and so are the Wildcats.
Yeah, and I think one thing in the past might be a little reluctant to hire a coach of Dump's age, but in the world we live in, players are not going to be staying at one school for 4 years that much anymore. I think you're going to see guys in and out. So therefore, a coach that might only be there 2 or 3 years is not as big a deal as it would have been back when we played.
Yeah. Now the Explorers are picked towards the bottom of the Atlantic 10. They've struggled the last few years. But it's going to be more interesting to see is how Villanova plays. You know, and we talk about this a lot when Coach Wright was here, and I'm sure Coach Neptune will be very similar. So he's really concerned with what the Wildcats are going to do, not so much what the opponent's going to do. If we play our brand of basketball, we play hard, we play smart, we play together, then we're going to be fine.
Yeah, and again, this is the first game for Kyle Neptune as head coach there. This is the first game for a lot of players on this team, and other players on the team, it's their first game in new roles. In other words, there's no Colin Gillespie, there's no Jermaine James, there's new leaders on this team, there's new center points on this team, there's new stars on this team. So how are they going to react? And again, I've said this a lot, I say it often on the air, is that if Villanova plays Villanova basketball, they play their game, they'll win. Villanova's better than LaSalle. You don't always win when you're the better team, but if Villanova plays their game, and I think they will, I feel confident in their success on Monday evening.
Well, it was a pleasure to do this with you today. I enjoyed it. I want everyone to join us after every home game here at the Pavilion and also at the Wells Fargo this year for our post-game show, which will be aired on Villanova Men's Basketball Twitter and Facebook. Look forward to seeing you at the Fitzgerald Lounge after every home game. Go Cats!